So we'd love to talk about the Hawaiian teas that we've imported just for the tea club. And we've got a green, a oolong and a white, but we're going to focus on the white for this interview because we want to know what makes it so special, because it is, of course, furiously expensive as well.
So the white tea from Hawaii is made from quite young plants that are planted under the forest trees in the garden where Eva Lee and her husband, who is a potter, he was a photographer, but he's a potter now, where they live. They built the house themselves, and they have this amazing garden that goes right round the house, and they have little patches of tea following the contours of the garden. And the plants that they use particularly for the white tea are under the forest trees, the natural, local, indigenous trees. And before they planted the tea plants, they had to pull up miles and miles and miles and miles and miles of wild roots of the wild ginger plant, which invades. I mean, it's a very invasive plant, and they had to do it by hand because they couldn't get any machines in amongst the trees. So that took loads of work. And of course, there are still a certain number of roots in the soil there, but it's quite foresty. And so these lovely ferns and local trees give a certain amount of shade to these quite young tea plants. So Eva and Chu, her husband, pick the teas from the leaves from those tea plants to make white tea. And it's the most beautiful place. It is really incredible. And their garden is actually on the slopes of the volcano, which just rumbles gently away all the time. And actually, when I was there, the platform, the viewing platform, which allows you to go above the volcano and look right down into the crater, had been moved right back because there's a little bit of activity, or there was a little bit of activity, which made it dangerous to be too close. And right up at the top of the volcano there, they have a seismology laboratory, so you can actually see what's going on. But of course, the soil, the volcanic soil, the whole atmosphere of the volcano is very alive, very creative. You feel the energy. And Pele, the goddess of the volcano, is revered and treated like a friend by the people that live on the island, even though she sometimes pours out her lava and destroys people's houses. But they totally respect that. I said to one chap once, "Don't you worry about living in the path of the lava flow if there was a volcanic eruption." He said, "If Pele wants to take my house, she can have it." So it's a sort of symbiotic relationship between the volcano and the people that live there. And quite a lot of the people who live in Volcano Village are very creative. They're less so now, but in the past there were a lot of artists and writers, and Chu is a potter, Eva is a dancer and a choreographer. So there's definitely something there that causes this creativity to come
sort of
to the surface.
spiritual nature.
Yeah. And so the tea has become very much a part of that life. Because I think wherever people grow tea plants, they fall in love with them and they treat them like their babies, like their children, and they talk about them like their children. And they introduce their friends to their tea plants because they love them so much and they're part of the family. And so for Eva and Chu, growing tea sort of evolved from their involvement with the island, with the Big Island. They're both of Chinese blood. They have obviously they've inherited the whole tea culture from their past, from their parents and their grandparents. They have a wonderful, close relationship with the island. And so for them, the planting of the tea, the cultivation of the tea, the nurturing of these plants just became an organic part of their life. And almost as creative, if not more creative, for them than actually performing their normal professional activities. So tea in their lives is something very, very special. And of course, the teas are crafted by hand, and they can't pick very often because it's very slow growth. They're not so high, not as high as Darjeeling, but they are up the mountain.
Is it 2 distinct seasons?
Yes. Do you know, I haven't got to grips with the weather on the Big Island because you've got about 24 different microclimates in one area. And you can be in tropical rainforest 1 minute and then in desert the next. It's the most bizarre mixed place. And again, I think that's part of its magic and spiritual quality. So they pick in the spring, and I've only ever tasted the spring teas. And I haven't tasted this year's yet. I have to say I haven't tasted those, but last year's I tasted with Eva, and we tasted them a few days after she'd picked them. And I said to Eva when we drank the first few sips, I said, this has got a gingery note to it. And she said, yeah, they're quite different from last year. And the reason is because 2 days before we picked the tea to make these white teas, the volcano gave a little judder. Pele was probably cleaning a room or just having a little bit of a, walk around. And so the ground shook a little bit. And so the ginger roots that are still in the garden obviously gave out a little bit of their juices into the soil, and the tea plants absorbed that. And there's no other way to account for this ginger note, because the previous year when I drank the white teas, they tasted of roses. So it's just an extraordinary thing, and it really proves, it shows you how close the topography, the actual location where the plants are growing, are affected by everything that goes on around it, the weather, that whatever's happening in the volcano, whatever other things are happening under the soil, how much sun, how much rain, all of those things are going to affect the way that the tea actually tastes, which is fantastic.
When it comes to the price of these teas, there's no doubt they are possibly the most expensive white tea in the world. They're certainly right up there. How can we explain or even justify this price?
I think the high prices of certain teas is usually because they are crafted by tea masters who are very skilled at what they do, and also because of very, very small quantities being produced. And of course, Eva and her husband, they're literally growing a few plants in their garden. They do everything themselves. They cultivate, they pick, they manufacture, and they are incredibly high quality. They are just lovely teas. And I think when we know the provenance in that way, when we can see a leaf that has been made and we know everything about it, about who's grown it, how they've handled it, how they've manufactured it, these are the kind of high prices that we are used to seeing from China, where a tea master of years of experience who has learnt from his forefathers, father, grandfather, etc., is actually classed as a tea master and designated as such by the government. And I think it's very similar. So I think the fact that there are small quantities, that it's very, very carefully crafted, that the story is there, that we know everything about it, and it's in this amazing location. Plus, it's Hawaii, which is
part
expensive.
Of America.
Yeah,
yes.
So labour costs, everything is more expensive anyway, much more expensive than in China or in Africa or in India. So again, prices are bound to be higher. And to compare it, I was presenting a tea this morning on Channel 4. A Longjing, a Chinese dragon well, which actually costs £1,100 a kilo. But other teas made by the same tea master have in the past sold at £12,000 for 100 grams. So, it's not that unusual to have teas that are unbelievably high priced because of everything that goes into that tea. Everything, the soil, everything.
Lovely. Thank you very, very much indeed, Jane. And we'll be hearing from you again soon, I hope.